Clearly, we're seeing a huge push on this issue, at least, socially. How much is it actually playing into what companies are doing? When you look at the gender pay gap, when you look at women on boards, how much are the headlines that we read every day actually pushing companies and investors to take a more gender-neutral stance?
Well, I think it's an issue that's growing in the crescendo of activity as well as the talk. Excuse me. Sorry. But the Legal in General, for example, excuse me, we have been gradually using our vote. Last year we voted against 37 different FTSE chairs who weren't doing enough around gender equality, particularly on boards. More recently, we've announced that we're going to vote against those that have less than 25% women on their boards. So I think it's moved from years of sort of rumbling talk and lots of press coverage to real concerted action. We've just launched a fund at Legal & General called the Gender in Leadership Fund, the Girl Fund for short, which actually has 4 criteria, and it's a UK equity fund. It's the first of its kind to take this gender lens to investing, and we are prioritising investing more in those companies that have more women in their workforce, more women in leadership teams, more women execs, and more women in the boards, and taking the money away from those that are doing less. So talk is cheap. We're now putting our money to work as well.
How difficult a process is that? When you structured it, when you thought about the rules that this fund was going to operate with, how difficult was it to create that structure, and how easy is it to find the companies to put into it?
Well, actually, in the UK, it's been relatively straightforward, and that's because the government has pushed companies to be much more transparent about the publication of the data. Obviously, we had the Davis review several years ago, 30% Club that I had founded, and there's been quite a lot of pressure on companies to publish, most recently, of course, the gender pay gap data. You don't have that in other countries. So actually, it was quite straightforward. We just had to work out what was the sort of tipping point when the, because clearly we don't have 50-50 at any of these levels. So what was the tipping point? And we set that at 30%, which in my experience has been the sort of critical mass point. But all companies sort of qualify for having some form of investment. If you're doing great, you'll get a double weighting, and if you're really doing badly, you'll get excluded. But those extremes are pretty limited. We want to still constructively engage with companies. We don't want to just kind of say, you're rubbish on this, we're pulling out of all our money. We want to actually be there. We did actually write to the bottom companies on the day of the Girl Fund launched and say, look, we'd love to help you.
Bloomberg has a gender equality index, a global gender equality index that's performed basically in line with the S&P 500 over the last couple of years. This incorporates companies that are up to standard as far as not only hiring but also reporting the transparency issues. One of the things that's hard for us to determine, though, is the gender pay gap. And I know that it's difficult for you as well, although recently we've seen some companies, a large amount of companies in the UK, publish their gender pay gap. Will you start to incorporate that in your fund?
Yeah, so actually when we applied for regulatory approval, we signaled then that we would look to include the gender pay gap data. Obviously, at the time when we were doing that, there wasn't the data. Now there is, and we've been going through it, first of all, checking that it's accurate. There's quite a few sort of rogue reports in there. There's also, obviously, a question mark over how will you then measure progress? Because this, again, isn't just about beating people up. This is not just about naming and shaming, but about naming and faming. We want to reward progress that people are making as well. So right now, we're working through the methodology. The UK, I think, is the only country that has insisted and made it mandatory on a legal basis for companies that have more than 250 employees, at least, to publish their gender pay gap data and not to adjust the numbers according to roles. So this is shorthand for women, because they're always, usually negative pay gaps, that women doing less highly valued work than men. And that is a really important part of the equality drive, I think, from here.
Can we just, I've only got a minute left, but can we talk about how we solve the problem of recklessly cautious women?
Yeah, so in the UK, only 9% of women in their 40s and 50s, so my age cohort, although I'm at the upper end of that, invest in a stocks and shares ISA. And obviously it's wrong in terms of building wealth. And we've discovered through various bits of research that actually women, there's not one single answer of reasons why they won't invest. Often it's to do with less confident about finances. Now, we can argue whether that's justified or not. I think often men say they're more confident.
I was about to say maybe the men are too kind of.
Well, I'm going to get myself into trouble if I say that. But yes, I think women just hold back sometimes. I think also there's a sense of being patronised too sometimes when they go and see a financial advisor and they just don't feel understood. And thirdly, I think sometimes women just don't think it's for them. They think, you know, money is for very wealthy, investing is for very wealthy people and so forth. And actually what I'm trying to do is popularise investing, really motivate people, make it something that will help them to feel more secure about their financial well-being. I was at a dinner last night for women in pensions, and the fantastic comedian that was on the stage confessed. She said, "I'm 46, I don't have a pension. Is it too late?" And of course the audience roared yes, you know, which was rather discouraging. But you know, we need people to feel more confident about their future, and I'm hoping that by offering funds like the Gender Leadership Fund that might tie in with what interests people, and climate change is another big issue, of course, that people care about, then they might feel motivated to get invested.